The advertisement in the San Bernardino Gazette reads simple enough. Widower rancher seeks housekeeper, room and board provided, wages negotiable. But when Natalie Harper stepped off the dusty stagecoach in August of 1878, she had no intention of staying longer than it took to earn passage farther west to California's coast, where her sister supposedly waited. The California heat pressed down on her black traveling dress like a physical weight as she clutched her single carpet bag and surveyed the sun-bleached buildings of San Bernardino. The town sprawled at the foot of the mountains, a collection of adobe structures and wooden storefronts that promised civilization but delivered something rawer. Cattle lowed in distant pens. Somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil. The air smelled of dust and horses and the peculiar brightness of desert sage. Natalie adjusted her bonnet against the glare and consulted the slip of paper she'd carefully preserved throughout her journey from Missouri. The Grayson Ranch lay 5 miles north of town. She'd need to hire a wagon or walk, and her funds barely covered a meal, let alone transportation. "You look lost, miss." She turned to find an elderly man with a beard like a tumbleweed watching her from the shade of the general store's awning. His eyes, though kind, held the wariness common to those who'd survived hard country. "I'm looking for the Grayson Ranch," she said, squaring her shoulders. "I'm here about the housekeeper position." The old man's eyebrows climbed toward his hat. "Vincent Grayson's place. You sure about that, miss?" "He's not exactly known for his hospitality." "I'm quite sure." "Well," he scratched his beard, "my grandson's heading that direction with a delivery. Mike could take you along, seeing as you're expected and all." Expected. The word settled over her like a lie, but Natalie nodded her thanks. She hadn't exactly confirmed her acceptance of the position through correspondence. The truth was, she'd seen the advertisement in a newspaper someone had left at the boarding house in Kansas, and desperate circumstances had transformed possibility into necessity. The wagon ride proved every bit as uncomfortable as she'd anticipated. The grandson, a taciturn youth of perhaps 16, seemed to have exhausted his capacity for conversation after learning her name. They bounced along a rutted path that cut through scrubland dotted with Joshua trees and patches of wild grass where cattle grazed in clusters, their brands visible even from a distance. The Grayson Ranch revealed itself gradually. First came the fencing, well-maintained and sturdy. Then the outbuildings appeared, a barn that had been recently painted, a stable, a bunkhouse, and various sheds arranged with practical efficiency. Finally, the main house came into view, a sprawling structure of adobe and timber that sat beneath a pair of massive cottonwood trees like an oasis in the desert landscape. A man emerged from the barn as the wagon rattled into the yard. Even from a distance, Natalie could see he was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his surroundings. He wore work clothes, dusty from labor, and a hat that had seen better days. "That's Vincent Grayson himself," the boy offered, his first voluntary contribution to their acquaintance. "Runs the best cattle operation in the valley, they say, though he's been managing alone since his wife passed 2 years back. His daughter helps, but she's only 10. Natalie's stomach tightened. A daughter. The advertisement hadn't mentioned a child. Vincent Grayson approached the wagon with an expression that shifted from curiosity to confusion as his gaze settled on Natalie. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of strong coffee. Sun lines creased the corners of those eyes, and his jaw carried several days' worth of stubble. He was handsome in the way of men carved by hard work and harder losses. Vincent Grayson, Natalie asked, though she knew the answer. That's right. His voice carried a roughness like gravel under wagon wheels. And you are, Natalie Harper. I've come about the housekeeper position. Silence stretched between them while dust motes danced in the afternoon sun. The boy began unloading supplies from the wagon bed with studied disinterest. I didn't receive a response to the advertisement, Vincent said finally. No, sir. My circumstances were such that immediate departure was necessary. I took the liberty of assuming the position remained available. She lifted her chin slightly, refusing to let him see the desperation that had driven her across half the continent. You took the liberty. He repeated her words slowly, as if tasting them for truth. His gaze traveled over her, assessing not with impropriety but with the practical eye of a man evaluating whether she could handle the work required. Whatever he saw must have satisfied something because he sighed. The position is available, though I'll be honest, Miss Harper, it's harder work than most women expect. I'm not most women. A ghost of something, perhaps amusement, flickered across his weathered face. I can see that. Come inside. We'll discuss terms. The interior of the house surprised her. She'd expected bachelor disorder, but while the furnishings were plain and practical, everything stood clean and organized. A large central room served multiple purposes, with a dining table at one end and comfortable chairs arranged near a stone fireplace at the other. The kitchen occupied an alcove, well equipped and tidy. Doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. I have a daughter, Vincent said without preamble, gesturing for her to sit at the table. Violet. She's 10, lost her mother to fever 2 years ago. She needs a woman's influence, but that's not why I placed the advertisement. I need someone who can cook, clean, manage the household accounts and not fall apart when the work gets hard. The previous housekeeper lasted 3 weeks before deciding ranch life wasn't suited to her constitution. Natalie folded her hands in her lap. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I can cook, clean, sew, and manage accounts. I'm accustomed to hard work and long hours. What I require is fair wages, room and board, and respectful treatment. Room's through there. He pointed to a door off the main room. It's small but private. Meals with the family. Wages are $30 a month. Work starts at dawn and ends when the work's done, but I don't expect you to labor past dark unless there's special circumstance. Sundays are your own after breakfast is cleared. Respectful treatment is a given. I may be a widower in need of help, but I'm not a savage. $30 a month was more than generous. Natalie tried not to let her relief show. Those terms are acceptable. Good. You can start tomorrow. Tonight, get settled. Violet will be back from town shortly. She's been staying with the preacher's wife when I'm working, but that arrangement can't continue indefinitely. As if summoned by her name, the door flew open and a whirlwind in calico skirts burst into the room. Violet Grayson was all flying dark braids and sun-browned skin, her face bright with the kind of energy that only children possess in abundance. She skidded to a stop when she saw Natalie, her eyes going wide. "Papa, who's this?" "This is Miss Harper. She's going to be our new housekeeper." Violet's expression cycled through surprise, hope, and something more guarded in rapid succession. "The last one left." "I know, sweetheart. She said I was too wild and gave her headaches." Natalie spoke before Vincent could respond. "I grew up with 3 younger brothers. I doubt you could be wilder than they were, and I survived them just fine." The girl studied her with unnerving directness. "Can you make biscuits? Real ones, not the hard kind that Papa makes that could break your teeth." "I can." "Can you braid hair properly?" "Mine always gets lumpy when Papa tries." "Yes." "Do you know how to ride a horse?" "I do." Violet looked at her father. "Can we keep her?" Vincent's laugh surprised Natalie. It was rusty, as if he hadn't used it much lately, but genuine. "She's not a stray cat, Violet. Miss Harper is an employee. But can she stay? That's up to Miss Harper and how well the arrangement works for everyone involved." The girl turned back to Natalie with an intensity that was almost physical. "Please stay. I promise I'll be good and help with chores and not complain even when Papa makes me study my sums." Something in Natalie's chest, some part she'd thought sealed shut after too many disappointments, cracked open just a fraction. "I'll stay as long as the position suits us both." That first evening passed in a blur of learning the house's rhythms. Vincent showed her the pantry, the root cellar, the chicken coop, and the garden that struggled against the August heat. Violet shadowed them, offering commentary that ranged from helpful to charmingly absurd. By the time darkness fell and the oil lamps were lit, Natalie felt exhausted but cautiously optimistic. She lay in her small room that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. Cattle lowed in the distance. Something, probably a coyote, yipped at the moon. Through the thin walls, she could hear the low rumble of Vincent's voice as he tucked Violet into bed. Though she couldn't make out the words, California stretched before her like a promise only partially fulfilled. She'd meant to reach the coast, to find her sister who'd written of opportunity and new beginnings. But that letter had been 6 months old when Natalie received it, and the address in San Francisco felt increasingly like a mirage. Perhaps this ranch, this strange man and his lonely daughter, represented something closer to what she actually needed. Morning came brutally early. Natalie woke to pre-dawn darkness and the sound of movement elsewhere in the house. She dressed quickly in her simple work dress and emerged to find Vincent already up, pulling on his boots near the door. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Usually head out to check the stock before breakfast." "What time do you normally eat, sunup?" "About an hour from now. Then I'll have it ready." He paused, hat in hand, studying her in the dim lamplight. "You don't have to prove anything your first day." "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm doing the job I was hired for." Something shifted in his expression, a kind of respect mixing with lingering uncertainty. "Biscuits, bacon, and eggs if we have them. Coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Nothing fancy required. Understood?" After he left, Natalie explored the kitchen more thoroughly. Someone had organized it with thought and care. Perhaps Vincent's late wife, or perhaps Vincent himself, possessed hidden domestic talents. She found flour, lard, salt, and buttermilk. The chickens, once roused from their roosts, provided fresh eggs. Bacon hung in the smokehouse. By the time eastern light began painting the mountains gold, she had breakfast well in hand. The biscuits rose golden and fluffy. The bacon crisped perfectly. The eggs fried with edges just slightly lacy, the way her father had preferred. Violet appeared like a small ghost, hair tangled from sleep, rubbing her eyes. "It smells good. Then wash your hands and set the table." The girl obeyed without argument, which surprised Natalie until she realized Violet was simply starved for maternal direction. They worked in companionable silence until Vincent returned, bringing the smell of horses and morning air with him. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. The table set with care, the food steaming on plates, his daughter's face bright with something like happiness. When his gaze found Natalie's, it held a complicated mixture of gratitude and pain. "Smells good," he said, echoing his daughter's words. They ate together as the sun rose fully, flooding the room with light that turned everything golden. Natalie watched them covertly, noting the way Vincent's attention never strayed far from his daughter, how he gently corrected her manners without criticism, how he listened when she chattered about wanting to help with the horses. I need to ride out to the north pasture today, Vincent said as he finished his second cup of coffee. Check on the herd there and make sure the water source is holding. I'll be back by sunset. Will Violet accompany you? He looked at his daughter, then back at Natalie. I usually take her along when I can, but if you need her here to learn the household routine. I think spending time with her father is more important than learning to dust on her first day with a new housekeeper. Besides, I'll need time to familiarize myself with your systems. Violet beamed. Can I really come, Papa, if you promise to mind me and stay close? I promise. They left an hour later, Violet mounted on a gentle mare and Vincent on a rangy bay gelding that looked like it could run forever. Natalie watched from the porch as they rode north, becoming silhouettes against the vast California sky before disappearing entirely. The silence they left behind felt immense. Natalie stood for a moment, absorbing it, then turned to survey her new domain. The house needed deep cleaning, the kind that went beyond daily maintenance. She rolled up her sleeves and began. By the time Vincent and Violet returned as the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and purple, Natalie had worked her way through the main room, the kitchen, and was starting on the hallway. Her back ached and her hands were raw, but the satisfaction of visible progress sustained her. Miss Harper, Violet called as she burst through the door. We saw an eagle. A real one flying so close Papa said we could almost touch it. How wonderful, Natalie said, meaning it. The girl's joy was infectious. Vincent followed his daughter inside, moving more slowly. Fatigue lined his face, but he looked content in a way that suggested the day's work had gone well. His gaze traveled over the transformed room, noting the swept floors, the dusted surfaces, the general air of freshness. You've been busy, he said quietly. I have standards, Natalie replied. Though I hope you don't mind. I rearranged a few things for better efficiency. I don't mind. He removed his hat, running a hand through hair that stuck up at odd angles. I appreciate it, actually. Place hasn't looked this good since. He didn't finish the sentence, but Natalie understood. Since his wife died. Since the heart went out of his home maintenance, since loneliness became a film of dust over everything. Supper will be ready in half an hour, she said, giving him an escape from the moment's heaviness. Violet, would you like to help me make cornbread? The girl's enthusiastic agreement broke the tension, and soon the house filled with the warm smell of baking bread and frying chicken. Natalie had found a preserving jar of green beans in the cellar, and those simmered with bacon until they were tender and rich. That night established the pattern for the days that followed. Vincent rose before dawn to see to the stock. Natalie prepared breakfast. They ate together as a makeshift family. Then Vincent went about the endless work of running a cattle ranch, while Natalie managed the household and Violet flitted between them like a butterfly, drawn to wherever attention could be found. Within a week, Natalie knew the ranch's rhythms as if she'd lived there for years. She learned that Vincent took his coffee black and strong, that he preferred his shirts starched but not stiff, that he was patient with his daughter but demanding of himself. She learned that Violet was bright as a penny, hungry for learning but resistant to sitting still, that she'd adored her mother and missed her with a fervor that sometimes exploded into tears at unexpected moments. She learned that Vincent Grayson was a good man carrying grief like a stone in his chest, that he worked himself to exhaustion to avoid feeling it, that sometimes late at night she could hear him pacing his room when sleep wouldn't come. The second week, Violet fell ill with a summer cold. Nothing serious, but the girl felt miserable enough that she wanted to be coddled. Natalie made soup and tea, read stories, and sat beside the child's bed doing mending while Violet dozed fitfully. Vincent appeared in the doorway that evening, concern etched deep in his features. "How is she?" Better. The fever broke an hour ago. She just needs rest now. He moved to the bedside, placing a work-roughened hand on his daughter's forehead with surprising gentleness. Violet stirred, opening her eyes. "Papa, I'm here, sweetheart. Miss Harper made me soup. It was good. I'm glad." He smoothed her hair back. "You sleep now. You'll feel better tomorrow. Will you tell me a story?" "What kind of story?" "About Mama, how you met her." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Natalie started to rise to give them privacy, but Vincent spoke before she could escape. "You know that story by heart, Violet, but I like hearing you tell it." He settled onto the edge of the bed, his profile limned by lamplight. "All right. Your mama came to San Bernardino with her family when she was 16. They were passing through on their way to the gold fields, and their wagon broke an axle right in front of my father's ranch. He offered them hospitality while repairs were made, and I took one look at Catherine Hayes and forgot my own name." Natalie remained frozen by the door, unable to leave, unable to intrude, simply listening. "She had red hair that caught the sun like fire," Vincent continued, his voice softening. "And she laughed at my terrible jokes. I was only 18, too young to know what I wanted from life, but I knew I wanted her in it. Took me 3 days to work up the courage to talk to her properly. By the end of the week, when her family's wagon was repaired, I'd asked her to stay, asked her to marry me. And she said yes," Violet murmured, her eyes drifting closed. "She said yes. Best decision I ever made, convincing her to take a chance on a rancher's son with more dreams than sense. You miss her." "Every day, sweetheart, every single day. Me too." "I know." Natalie slipped away then, leaving them to their shared grief. In the kitchen, she busied herself with unnecessary tasks, giving Vincent time with his daughter, giving herself time to process the ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her own sorrows and everything to do with theirs. When Vincent emerged 20 minutes later, Violet was asleep and he looked hollowed out. "Coffee," Natalie offered. "Please." They sat at the table together, the house quiet around them. Vincent wrapped his hands around the cup as if drawing warmth from it despite the evening's lingering heat. "Thank you," he said finally, "for taking care of her, for being patient with her. She's easy to care for, she likes you. It's been hard for her since Catherine died. Mrs. Peterson, the previous housekeeper, meant well, but she had no experience with children. Before that, we tried managing on our own, but I'm not equipped to be both parents. You're doing better than you think." He looked at her then, really looked, and Natalie felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Why did you come here, really? A woman like you could find work in town, something easier than ranch life." Natalie chose her words carefully. "I came west looking for my sister. She wrote me from San Francisco 6 months ago about opportunities there. But when I arrived in San Bernardino, I realized I didn't have enough funds to continue. I needed work, and your advertisement seemed like fate. Have you heard from your sister since?" "No. I've sent letters but received no reply. Either she's moved on or—" Natalie let the sentence hang, unwilling to voice her fears. "Or the opportunities didn't pan out the way she hoped," Vincent finished gently. "That happens out here. People chase dreams west and find reality instead." "What dream did you chase?" "I didn't chase one. I was born here. My father built this ranch from nothing, and when he died 5 years ago, it became mine. This is all I've ever known." He paused, studying his coffee. "Catherine was the one with dreams. She wanted to build something here, create a legacy, a home that mattered. It sounds like she succeeded. She died before seeing it complete. There's still so much I wanted to give her, so much we planned together that I'm now doing alone." The confession hung between them, intimate in its honesty. Natalie recognized it for what it was, a moment of connection forged in shared loneliness and late-night vulnerability. "You're not alone," she said quietly. "You have Violet." "I do, and now I have you at least for a while." The words shouldn't have affected her the way they did, but Natalie felt them settle somewhere deep. She'd spent so long being unmoored, drifting from one temporary situation to another, that the possibility of staying somewhere felt almost foreign. "For a while," she agreed, though something in her already resisted the temporary nature of the arrangement. The third week brought unexpected complications. A neighboring rancher named Samuel Peterson rode up one afternoon while Vincent was in town purchasing supplies. He was a florid man in his 50s, prosperous and pompous, with a manner that set Natalie's teeth on edge immediately. "I heard Grayson finally found himself a housekeeper," Peterson said, his gaze traveling over Natalie in a way that made her skin crawl. "Pretty thing like you must have men lining up." "I'm here to work, Mr. Peterson, not to entertain callers." "Feisty too, I like that." He dismounted without invitation. "I have business with Grayson, I'll wait." "Mr. Grayson won't return for several hours." "Then I'll enjoy your company until he does." Natalie's hands tightened on the broom she'd been using to sweep the porch. "That won't be necessary. You can discuss your business another time. Now, don't be like that. I'm just being neighborly." He took a step closer and Natalie retreated toward the door. "A woman alone at a ranch like this needs friends. I could be a very good friend." "Step back, Mr. Peterson." "Or what? You'll tell Grayson. He won't do anything. He needs my cooperation for water rights access." Before Natalie could respond, Violet appeared in the doorway, her young face set in fierce lines. "My papa will do plenty if you don't leave Miss Harper alone, and I'll tell him everything." Peterson's expression soured. "Children should be seen and not heard." "And men should have manners," Violet shot back. "You don't leave." For a moment tension stretched taut as a wire. Then Peterson laughed, an ugly sound. "Fine. Tell Grayson I stopped by. Tell him I'll be back to discuss the water rights situation, and he'd better be prepared to negotiate favorably." He mounted and rode off, leaving dust and discomfort in his wake. Natalie released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you," she told Violet. "He's a terrible man." Mama didn't like him either. She said he had wandering hands and a wandering eye and Papa should never do business with him. Your mother was a wise woman. When Vincent returned that evening, Natalie debated whether to mention Peterson's visit. She didn't want to cause trouble or seem unable to handle difficulties, but Violet had no such compunctions. "Mr. Peterson was here and he was mean to Miss Harper," she announced over supper. Vincent's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What happened?" Natalie summarized the encounter, downplaying Peterson's behavior. Vincent's expression grew darker with each word. "He threatened you." He made suggestions that were inappropriate. Violet handled the situation admirably. "I won't have him on this property again." Vincent's voice carried an edge Natalie hadn't heard before. "Water rights be damned. I'll find another solution." "What are water rights?" Violet asked. "Peterson controls access to a creek that runs through his property and borders ours," Vincent explained, visibly reining in his anger. "We have our own wells, but during dry years that creek access becomes important for the cattle. He knows it and uses it as leverage." "Leverage for what?" "For getting what he wants, which apparently now includes harassing my housekeeper." He looked at Natalie. "I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. It's not your fault. It is if my business associations create danger for people under my roof." The phrase "under my roof" resonated with implications of protection and responsibility. Natalie felt simultaneously grateful and uncomfortable with the intensity of Vincent's reaction. "I can handle men like Peterson," she said. "I don't doubt it, but you shouldn't have to." The conversation moved on, But Natalie caught Vincent watching her throughout the meal with a new awareness, as if he'd suddenly recognized her not just as hired help, but as a woman requiring protection. It was chivalrous and outdated and warmed something inside her that she'd thought long frozen. That night, unable to sleep, Natalie stepped onto the porch for air. The desert night was cool and spangled with stars so numerous they looked like spilled salt across black cloth. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and breathed in the smell of sage and night-blooming flowers. Couldn't sleep either. She turned to find Vincent emerging from the barn, hay stuck in his hair and dirt on his clothes. He looked exhausted. "Too much on my mind," Natalie admitted. "Same." He climbed the porch steps and leaned against the railing beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I was checking on one of the horses. She's due to foal soon and I'm worried about her. Will she be all right?" "I think so, but I've lost animals before. You never stop worrying." They stood in companionable silence, watching the night. An owl called from somewhere in the cottonwoods. Cattle shifted and settled in their sleep. "You've done good work here," Vincent said eventually. "Better than good. The house feels like a home again." "Violet is happier than she's been in 2 years. I want you to know I see that. I appreciate it. Thank you. I also want you to know that if you decide to continue on to San Francisco to find your sister, I'll understand, but I hope you'll consider staying. Not just because we need you, though we do, but because I think you might need us too." The observation was too accurate for comfort. Natalie wrapped her shawl tighter. "What makes you think that?" "The way you look sometimes when you think no one's watching. Like you're waiting for permission to belong somewhere." His perception unnerved her. "That's quite an assumption. It's an observation. One person who's been lonely recognizing another." Natalie turned to face him, finding his expression open and honest in the starlight. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Grayson? That maybe you stop thinking of this as temporary. That maybe San Bernardino could be where you settle instead of just where you stopped. That maybe this ranch could be home if you let it." "And what would that mean?" "Exactly," he met her gaze steadily. "It would mean a permanent position if you want it. Fair wages, respect, a place to belong. It would mean being part of Violet's life as she grows. It would mean—" He paused, seeming to choose his words with care. "It would mean I'd have a friend in this. Someone who understands what it's like to carry loss, but keep moving forward anyway. Friends." The word was safe, appropriate, and somehow entirely inadequate for what hummed between them in the darkness. But Natalie recognized it for the olive branch it was, an invitation to something more solid than temporary employment. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Being friends. Good." His smile transformed his face, erasing years of care. "That's good, Natalie." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his rough voice did strange things to her equilibrium. She smiled back, helpless against the warmth spreading through her chest. "You should call me Vincent, if we're to be friends." "Vincent," she tested, tasting the shape of his name. "All right." The moment stretched, full of possibility and fragile hope. Then Vincent cleared his throat and straightened. "I should let you rest. Morning comes early, it does. Good night, Vincent. Good night, Natalie." She watched him walk back to the barn, presumably to check on the pregnant mare one more time, and felt the world shift beneath her feet. She'd come to California chasing her sister's dream, only to find something else entirely. Something that looked remarkably like a future she'd never dared imagine for herself. The weeks that followed took on a golden quality, as if someone had turned up the sun's warmth despite autumn's approach. Natalie settled into her role with increasing confidence, managing not just the household but the small crises that arose with ranch life. A broken fence that let cattle into the garden. A sudden rainstorm that threatened the grain stores. Violet's ongoing education, which Natalie supplemented with reading lessons and arithmetic problems disguised as baking measurements. Vincent, for his part, began including her in decisions that went beyond housekeeping. Where to purchase winter supplies, whether to sell cattle now or wait for better prices, how to handle a dispute with a hand over wages. "I value your opinion," he said simply when she questioned why he sought her input on ranch business. "You're smart and you see things clearly. Why wouldn't I ask?" They began taking evening walks together after Violet went to bed, ostensibly so Vincent could show her the property, but really just to talk. Natalie learned about his childhood on the ranch, his father's exacting standards and his mother's gentle wisdom. She learned about Catherine's death, how the fever had taken her in 3 days despite the doctor's best efforts, how he'd felt his world end while his daughter sobbed herself to sleep every night for months. In turn, she told him about Missouri, about her parents' deaths in a farm accident, about her sister's sudden departure west with promises to send for Natalie once she was established, about the years of working other people's farms and homes, always temporary, always on the edge of moving on. "Do you regret it?" Vincent asked one evening as they walked along the fence line under a sky turning purple with dusk. "Coming west, following your sister?" "No," Natalie said, surprising herself with the certainty. "If I hadn't come west, I wouldn't have found this place. I wouldn't have found you and Violet." He stopped walking, turning to face her. They stood close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to smell the soap he'd used after his evening wash-up. "I'm glad you found us," he said quietly. "I don't know what we did to deserve you showing up when you did, but I'm grateful for it every day. Vincent." She didn't know what she wanted to say, but his name seemed important. "I need to tell you something." He took a breath as if gathering courage. "I care about you. Not just as an employee or even just as a friend. I care about you as a woman I've come to admire and respect and, God help me, have feelings for that go beyond what's proper given our arrangement." Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. "That's not very practical of you. I know. I've been fighting it for weeks, but Peterson's visit made me realize that other men see what I've been trying not to acknowledge. You're beautiful and capable and kind, and I have no claim on you that would prevent someone else from courting you if you were interested. I'm not interested. In Peterson or anyone else. No, no." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze squarely. "The only man whose attention I want is standing right in front of me, being frustratingly noble about our respective positions." His breath caught. "Natalie, I care about you too, Vincent. I have for weeks. Maybe from the first moment I saw you walking across the yard, looking like you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. I wanted to help lift it. I wanted to make you smile. I wanted." She faltered, then pressed on. "I wanted things I had no right to want from my employer. You have every right." He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and when she didn't, he cupped her face with one calloused hand. "You have every right to want anything you desire. And if what you desire is me, then I'm the luckiest man in California." He kissed her then, gentle and questioning, as if she might break or disappear. Natalie rose on her toes, kissing him back with all the longing she'd been suppressing, and felt something in her chest unlock. This was what belonging felt like. This sense of rightness, of two puzzle pieces clicking together after a lifetime of mismatched edges. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things," he said. "Yes. I don't want you to be just my housekeeper anymore. What do you want me to be? My wife. If you'll have me. If you'll take a chance on a widower rancher with a ready-made family and more dreams than sense." Natalie laughed, joy bubbling up irrepressibly. "Those words sound familiar." They worked on Catherine, Thought I'd try them again. That's terrible logic. Is it working? She kissed him again, softer this time, full of promise. Yes, you impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you. His whoop of joy startled the cattle in the nearby pasture. He swept her up and spun her around until they were both dizzy and laughing, until the stars seemed to spin overhead and the whole world reduced to this moment of perfect happiness. When he set her down, he grew more serious. We should tell Violet first thing tomorrow, see how she feels about it. You don't think she'll object? Are you joking? She'll probably demand to know what took us so long. He was right. When they told Violet over breakfast the next morning that Vincent had asked Natalie to marry him and she'd said yes, the girl shrieked with delight and flung herself at Natalie with enough force to nearly knock her off her chair. Does this mean you'll be my mama? Violet asked, her face shining with hope. Natalie's throat tightened. I could never replace your mama, sweetheart, but I would be honored to be your stepmother and love you as if you were my own. Can I call you Mama anyway? Natalie looked at Vincent, who had tears standing in his eyes. He nodded. If you'd like to, then yes. I'd like to very much. They decided on a simple wedding in town at the small church, just family and a few close friends. Natalie had no family to invite, which still stung when she let herself think about it. But Vincent's friends rallied around them with warm enthusiasm. The preacher's wife, Mrs. Anderson, took charge of the arrangements with the efficiency of a general marshalling troops. She insisted on making Natalie a proper dress, something better than her worn work clothes. Together, they selected a bolt of ivory cotton printed with small blue flowers, and Mrs. Anderson's skilled fingers transformed it into a gown that made Natalie feel beautiful. The wedding took place on a bright October morning when the air had finally cooled from summer's oppressive heat. Natalie stood at the front of the small church with her hand in Vincent's, listening to the preacher speak about love and commitment and building a life together. Violet sat in the front pew, beaming so hard it looked like her face might split. When Vincent slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and said, I do, with such conviction that it rang through the church, Natalie felt her old life finally, completely fall away. She was no longer Natalie Harper, itinerant housekeeper with no place to call home. She was Natalie Grayson, wife and stepmother, with roots reaching deep into California soil. The kiss they shared sealed more than vows. It sealed a promise of second chances and new beginnings, of loneliness transformed into companionship, of grief giving way to joy. The celebration afterward was modest but heartfelt. Mrs. Anderson had organized a meal at her home, and the town's few families who'd grown to know the Graysons attended. There was music and laughter and more food than seemed possible for such a small gathering. Violet danced with anyone who would partner her happiness infectious. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Vincent pulled Natalie aside to the garden behind the Anderson house. Happy? He asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Happier than I knew I could be. Good, because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. That's a bold promise. I'm a bold man when it comes to you. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife just as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. Violet, exhausted from excitement, fell asleep almost immediately. Vincent and Natalie stood together on the porch, watching the stars emerge. I was thinking, Vincent said, his arm around her waist, about Catherine, about what she would think of this. Natalie stiffened slightly, unsure how to navigate the mention of his first wife on their wedding night. I think she'd be happy, he continued. She loved this ranch and she loved Violet with everything in her. Her biggest fear when she was dying was what would happen to us without her. If she could see you here, see how you've brought light back into our lives, I think she'd be grateful. I think she'd approve. I hope so, Natalie said softly. I know so. Catherine was generous and good. She would want me to find happiness again. She would want Violet to have a mother's love, and she would like you tremendously if she could know you. Tell me something about her. Something happy. Vincent smiled, the expression tender with memory. She used to sing while she cooked. Terribly off-key, didn't know half the words to most songs, but she sang anyway because it made her happy. The kitchen would ring with this awful racket and Violet would laugh and I would pretend to complain, but really I loved it. The house felt alive when she sang. She sounds wonderful, she was, and so are you, different but wonderful in your own way. I'm lucky to have loved two such remarkable women. The words settled over Natalie like a blessing. She wasn't a replacement or a pale substitute. She was herself, valued for her own qualities, making her own place in this family story. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Vincent made love to his new wife with tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, curled against his side with his hand stroking her hair, Natalie felt peace settle into her bones. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Vincent replied, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for saying yes, thank you for staying. Where else would I go? This is home now. Home, he repeated, tasting the word. Yes, that's exactly what this is. The months that followed their wedding brought the kind of deep contentment that comes from lives intertwining completely. Natalie threw herself into making the ranch not just run smoothly, but thrive. She expanded the kitchen garden, putting up preserves for winter. She took over the ranch's bookkeeping and discovered they could afford to hire another hand, which eased Vincent's workload considerably. Violet flourished under the attention of two loving parents. Her wild energy found productive outlets in helping with chores and learning to ride properly. Her education advanced as Natalie worked with her daily on reading and mathematics. The haunted look that had lingered in her eyes since her mother's death gradually faded, replaced by the bright confidence of a child who felt secure. Winter came to San Bernardino, mild by Eastern standards but cold enough that they had to bring the cattle closer to the ranch buildings. Vincent worked long days ensuring the stock had enough feed and water. Natalie made sure he came home to warm meals and a warmer bed. One evening in December, as they sat before the fire after Violet had gone to sleep, Natalie gathered her courage to share news she'd been holding close for a week. Vincent, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the harness he'd been mending, immediately attentive. What is it? Are you all right? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. We're going to have a baby in summer, I think. The harness dropped forgotten to the floor. Vincent's expression cycled through shock, joy, wonder, and something that looked like fear. A baby, he repeated. Yes. I know we didn't discuss it and perhaps it's too soon, but he cut off her nervous rambling with a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't. When he pulled back, tears shone in his eyes. It's not too soon. It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm going to be a father again. You're happy. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He placed his hand more firmly over her stomach. A baby, our baby. God, Natalie. I was worried you might think it was too fast, that people would talk. Let them talk. We're married and in love and starting our family. There's nothing shameful in that. They told Violet the next morning, and her reaction was everything they could have hoped for. She bounced in her chair with excitement, immediately planning all the things she would teach the baby, all the ways she would help. Will it be a brother or a sister? She demanded. We won't know until the baby arrives, Natalie explained. I want a sister. But a brother would be fine too, I suppose. As long as the baby is healthy. Her mature words, clearly echoed from adult concerns she'd overheard, made both Vincent and Natalie smile. "As long as the baby is healthy," Vincent agreed, dropping a kiss on his daughter's head. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Natalie experienced some morning sickness and fatigue, but nothing severe. Vincent became almost comically protective, insisting she rest frequently and take no risks. Mrs. Anderson visited regularly, sharing advice and helping prepare baby clothes. In late March, a letter arrived from San Francisco. Natalie recognized her sister's handwriting on the envelope, and her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was apologetic and full of excuses. Her sister had moved several times, chasing work. She'd been ill for a while. She'd meant to write, but time had slipped away. She was doing well now, working as a seamstress, engaged to a shopkeeper. She hoped Natalie was well and still planning to come to San Francisco. Natalie read the letter twice, then set it aside. Vincent found her in the garden an hour later, staring at nothing. "Bad news?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bench. "Not bad, just complicated." She handed him the letter. "My sister finally wrote." He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "She's been well and simply didn't bother to respond to your letters, apparently. Are you going to write back? I don't know. Part of me wants to. She's my sister, my only family. But another part feels angry that she left me wondering and worrying for months while she built her new life without a thought for me." Vincent pulled her close. "Whatever you decide, I'll support. But Natalie, you need to know that you're not without family anymore. You have me and Violet and this baby on the way. You have a home and people who love you desperately. Your sister may be blood, but we're your family now too." His words broke something open in her chest. She cried then, not from sadness but from relief and gratitude and overwhelming love for this man who understood her so completely. "I'll write her back," Natalie decided. "I'll tell her about my marriage and the baby and how happy I am. I'll tell her she's welcome to visit if she wishes. But I won't chase her anymore. My life is here now." I think that's wise. She did write, a warm but measured letter that conveyed her news and extended cautious welcome. Her sister's response, when it came weeks later, was brief but genuine in its congratulations. They would likely never be as close as Natalie had once hoped, but the door was open if either of them chose to walk through it someday. That was enough. Summer arrived with fierce heat and longer days. Natalie's belly swelled until she could barely see her feet. Vincent fussed over her constantly, bringing her water and fanning her in the worst heat and rubbing her aching back at night. Violet talked to the baby through Natalie's stomach, telling elaborate stories about ranch life and making solemn promises to be the best big sister ever. The baby came in late July during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and turned the yard to mud. Mrs. Anderson attended the birth along with the town's doctor, a competent woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who trained back east before coming west for adventure. The labor was long and difficult. Natalie had known childbirth would be hard, but the reality exceeded expectation. Vincent stayed with her throughout, holding her hand and offering encouragement even when she cursed him for his part in her current suffering. Finally, as lightning split the sky and thunder rolled across the valley, a baby's cry joined the storm's fury. Dr. Chen placed a squalling, red-faced infant on Natalie's chest. "A boy," she announced. "Healthy and strong, lunged." Natalie looked down at her son, this tiny person who'd been growing inside her for months, and felt her heart expand to impossible dimensions. He had dark hair like his father, and a furious expression that suggested he was not pleased about his abrupt change in circumstances. Vincent stared at his son with naked wonder. "He's perfect," he breathed. "Natalie, he's absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Natalie asked, exhausted but exhilarated. They discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Vincent looked at her, then at the baby, then back at her. What about Victor? It means winner-conqueror, seems fitting for a boy born during a thunderstorm. Victor Grayson, Natalie tested. I like it. Victor Vincent Grayson. You want to use my name, he's your son. Of course I want to honor you. Vincent's eyes shone with tears. He kissed her forehead, then gently stroked his son's tiny hand with one calloused finger. The baby's fingers wrapped around his reflexively, and Vincent made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Hello, Victor. I'm your papa. I promise I'm going to do right by you. I'm going to teach you about the land and the cattle and how to be a good man. I'm going to love you and your mama for the rest of my life. Violet was allowed in shortly after, creeping to the bedside with wide eyes. When she saw the baby, her face transformed with delight. He's so small. All babies are small at first, Natalie explained. Would you like to hold your brother? With careful supervision, Violet held Victor for the first time, her expression solemn with the responsibility. I'm your big sister, she informed him. I'm going to protect you and teach you things and make sure nobody is mean to you ever. Victor, unimpressed with this declaration, yawned and fell asleep. The days after Victor's birth blurred together in a haze of feeding and changing and snatched moments of sleep. Natalie had never been so exhausted or so happy. Vincent helped whenever he could, pacing the floor with a fussy baby at night so Natalie could rest, changing diapers without complaint, staring at his son with an expression of perpetual amazement. I'd forgotten, he said one night as he rocked Victor to sleep. How small they are at first. How helpless. Violet was like this once, but it seems like a lifetime ago. Do you wish we'd waited? Natalie asked, watching him from the bed. God, no, this is exactly what we needed, what I needed. Another chance to get it right, to be present for every moment instead of working myself to exhaustion and missing things like I did when Violet was small. You were building a ranch, providing for your family. I was hiding from my feelings by drowning myself in work. I won't make that mistake again. He settled Victor in the cradle they'd set up beside the bed and climbed in next to Natalie, pulling her close. I'm going to be here for all of it this time. The first smile, the first tooth, the first steps, all of it, he kept that promise. As summer faded into autumn and Victor grew from a helpless newborn into a baby who smiled and cooed and grabbed at everything within reach, Vincent made sure to balance ranch work with family time. He hired another hand permanently, a young man named James who proved reliable and hardworking. The additional help meant Vincent could spend mornings with the cattle and afternoons with his family without running himself ragged. Violet proved to be an enthusiastic, if occasionally overzealous helper with her baby brother. She fetched diapers and sang to him and reported every tiny milestone to anyone who would listen. The loneliness that had defined her for so long disappeared entirely, replaced by the confidence of a child who knew she was loved and valued. One evening in late October, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Natalie stood on the porch watching Vincent teach Violet to rope a fence post while Victor dozed in her arms. The setting sun painted everything gold and orange, turning the ordinary scene into something almost magical. Mrs. Anderson, visiting to drop off some preserves she'd put up, came to stand beside her. You look content, the older woman observed. I am, more than I ever imagined possible. When you first arrived in San Bernardino, you looked like a ghost. Pale and insubstantial, like a strong wind might blow you away. Look at you now, solid and rooted and blooming. This place saved me, Natalie said simply. Vincent and Violet saved me. I think you saved each other. That house was dying when you arrived. Vincent was going through the motions of living without actually being alive, and Violet was so lost. Mrs. Anderson smiled. You brought them back to life and they gave you a place to belong. That's not saving. That's love. The word settled over Natalie like a warm blanket. Love. Yes, that's what this was. Not just romantic love, though she felt that for Vincent in overwhelming measure, but also familial love, the kind that bound people together through hardship and joy alike. The kind that built futures and weathered storms and transformed strangers into family. I'm lucky, Natalie said. You're blessed. There's a difference. Luck is chance. Blessing is what you make of the chances you're given. You took a gamble coming here and you've worked hard to build this life. That's not luck. That's wisdom and courage and love. That night, after Violet was in bed and Victor was settled in his cradle, Vincent and Natalie sat together on the porch as had become their habit. The air held the first real chill of approaching winter. You ever miss Missouri? Vincent asked. Your old life? Natalie considered the question seriously. I miss the idea of my parents sometimes, who they were before the accident, but Missouri itself. No, that was never really home, it was just where I happened to be. And San Bernardino, this is home, not just the town but this ranch, this porch. You and Violet and Victor, this is where I belong. Vincent pulled her closer. I'm glad, because I can't imagine this place without you anymore. You've become the heart of everything. I thought the ranch was the heart. The ranch is just land and cattle and buildings. You're what makes it matter. You and the children. You're what I work for, what I build for. Everything else is just details. Natalie turned to kiss him, a slow and tender expression of everything she felt. When they broke apart, she rested her head on his shoulder and looked up at the stars. Tell me about the future, she said. What do you see for us? I see Victor growing up strong and good. I see Violet becoming a woman who knows her own mind. I see maybe more children if we're blessed with them. I see growing old together on this porch, watching our grandchildren play in the yard. I see a lifetime of ordinary days made extraordinary by sharing them with you. That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? He pressed a kiss to her hair. Thank you, Natalie. For what? For taking a chance on a widower rancher with more dreams than sense. For loving my daughter as your own. For giving me a son. For making me believe in second chances and new beginnings. For being exactly who you are. You're going to make me cry, sorry. Don't be. They're happy tears. They sat together as the night deepened, comfortable in their silence, secure in their love. From inside the house, Victor made a small sound, not quite crying but moving toward it. Natalie started to rise, but Vincent stopped her. I'll get him. You rest. She watched her husband disappear into the house and heard his low voice murmuring to their son. The sound of masculine tenderness made her smile. A year ago, she'd stepped off a stagecoach with one carpetbag and a desperate hope for work. She'd expected temporary employment, a way station on the road to somewhere else. Instead, she'd found everything she'd been searching for without knowing it. A home, a family, a love that filled all the empty spaces in her heart. The winter of 1879 was mild, which the ranchers in the valley considered a blessing. The cattle stayed healthy and the work, while never easy, became manageable. Vincent hired a third hand in the spring, an older man named Dutch who'd worked cattle his whole life and had a wealth of knowledge to share. With the ranch running smoothly and profitably, Vincent began making improvements he'd long dreamed of. He built an addition onto the house, expanding the kitchen and adding a proper parlor. He purchased breeding stock to improve his herd. He even invested in one of the new windmills to pump water more efficiently. Catherine would approve, he told Natalie one evening as they surveyed the new windmill spinning lazily against the sunset. This was part of her vision, making the ranch not just survive but thrive, building something lasting. You think she would approve of me? Natalie asked, voicing a question that had haunted her sometimes in quiet moments. Vincent turned to her, surprise clear on his face. Of course. How could she not? You've loved her daughter and made her husband happy again. You've honored her memory by building on what she started rather than trying to erase it. If anything, I worry sometimes that I'm dishonoring her memory by being so happy. That's foolish. Is it? I loved her so much, and when she died I thought I'd never feel whole again. But then you came along and proved me wrong. Sometimes I feel guilty about that, about loving you as much as I loved her, about being complete again when she's gone. Natalie took his hand. Love isn't finite, Vincent. You didn't take love from Catherine to give to me. You're just capable of loving more than one person. That's not betrayal. That's being human. That's being lucky enough to find love twice. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just noticed. He laughed and pulled her close. Victor, now a sturdy toddler of 11 months, tried to escape from where Violet was watching him near the house. His sister scooped him up with the ease of long practice, making him squeal with delight. They're good together, Vincent observed. I worried Violet might resent having to share attention, but she's taken to being a big sister like she was born for it. She was lonely for so long. Having a sibling gives her purpose and companionship both. We should probably give her more siblings then. Natalie felt her cheeks warm. Are you suggesting something, Mr. Grayson? Just observing that our children are happy and healthy and maybe more would be a blessing. He slid his arms around her waist. But only if you want more. I'm already happier than I have any right to be. I'd like more, Natalie admitted. Not right away. I'd like Victor to be a bit older first. But yes, I'd like to fill this house with children and noise and love. Then that's what we'll do. And they did. Their second son, Thomas, arrived in the spring of 1881, a placid baby who seemed content to simply observe the chaos around him. Violet, now 13 and blossoming into a lovely young woman, helped with both her brothers with increasing competence. Victor, not quite 2, was fascinated by the new baby and constantly tried to share his toys. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt timeless. Seasons turned, cattle were born and raised and sold, crops were planted and harvested. Vincent's hair began showing gray at the temples. Violet started attracting the attention of young men in town, which gave Vincent anxiety and made Natalie laugh. Victor grew into a boisterous child full of questions and energy. Thomas remained placid and watchful, content to follow his older brother's lead. In the summer of 1883, tragedy struck when Samuel Peterson died suddenly of a heart seizure. His widow, wanting nothing to do with ranch life, sold the property at auction. Vincent debated whether to bid on it, knowing it would strain their finances, but also knowing the additional land and water rights would secure the ranch's future for generations. "What do you think?" he asked Natalie the night before the auction. "I think you already know what you want to do." "I want to bid, but it's a risk. If we overextend and have a bad year, we could lose everything. We could also gain security and opportunity. Besides, when have we ever shied away from risk? I took a risk coming here. You took a risk hiring a strange woman off the stagecoach. We took a risk falling in love and building this family. What's one more risk if it means building something better for our children?" Vincent kissed her soundly. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in at least 3 hours. I was starting to worry." He bid at the auction and won the Peterson property, much to the surprise of other ranchers who'd assumed he couldn't afford it. The purchase required taking on debt, but Vincent's reputation for hard work and fair dealing meant the bank extended favorable terms. Combining the properties nearly doubled their land holdings. Vincent hired 2 more hands and promoted Dutch to foreman. The increased work was worth it for the security it provided. That winter, as they celebrated Christmas with their growing family, Natalie reflected on how far she'd come. 5 years earlier, she'd been a woman with nothing, no family, no home, no future. Now she sat surrounded by children's laughter and her husband's love in a house that rang with life and warmth. Violet, now 15, had grown into a confident young woman who announced at dinner that she intended to become a teacher and help educate ranch children throughout the valley. Vincent looked torn between pride and sadness that his little girl was growing up. Victor, 4 and clever as a fox, was already begging to help with the cattle. Thomas, not quite 3, simply ate his Christmas pudding and smiled at everyone. "Next year," Vincent said, raising his glass in a toast, "we'll have even more to celebrate. The ranch is thriving, the children are healthy, and I have the best wife a man could ask for. Here's to the future." "To the future," Natalie echoed, clinking her glass against his. The future proved even brighter than they'd imagined. The ranch prospered through good management and favorable markets. Vincent became known throughout the valley as a fair employer and honest dealer. Violet attended normal school in San Francisco and returned to open a small school for ranch children, teaching out of a building Vincent constructed on their property. Victor developed into a natural horseman with an instinct for cattle that suggested he'd one day run the ranch himself. Thomas, quiet but observant, surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for figures and business that rivaled his mother's. In 1886, Natalie gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, honoring the memory of Vincent's first wife. Violet wept when they told her the baby's name, touched that they'd chosen to honor her mother that way. Catherine was a lively baby who grew into a spirited child, fearless and funny and adored by her older siblings. The years passed in a blur of ordinary moments that became extraordinary in retrospect. Birthdays and holidays and daily dinners together. Teaching children to ride and read and manage money. Supporting Violet through her first heartbreak, and celebrating when she met a young teacher named David who understood her passion for education. Watching Victor grow into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Seeing Thomas develop business connections that expanded their markets. Witnessing Catherine's fierce independence and quick mind. In 1892, Violet married David in a ceremony at the ranch, surrounded by family and friends. She was 24, her husband 26, both eager to build a life together while continuing their teaching work. Vincent cried during the ceremony, and Natalie held his hand, understanding the bittersweet joy of watching a child become an adult. "I remember the day you arrived," Vincent whispered during the reception. "Violet was so hungry for a mother's love, and you gave it to her without hesitation. Look at the woman she's become. She would have become wonderful regardless. She has your strength and Catherine's spirit. And your kindness and wisdom. You raised her as much as I did these last 14 years. Natalie watched Violet laugh at something her new husband said, radiant with happiness. "We raised her together. That's what parents do." 2 years later, Victor announced his intention to marry a rancher's daughter from the next valley over. Emma was practical and hardworking, with a ready smile and clear affection for Victor. The wedding was another joyous celebration, and within a year, they presented Vincent and Natalie with their first grandchild, a boy they named Vincent Jr. Holding her grandson for the first time, Natalie marveled at the continuation of family, the way love expanded to encompass new generations. Vincent stood beside her, grinning like a fool, already planning all the things he'd teach his grandson. Time continued its march. Thomas, more interested in business than ranching, moved to San Francisco where he worked in agricultural finance, though he visited regularly and maintained close ties to the family. Catherine, true to her spirited nature, scandalized polite society by announcing her intention to attend college and become a veterinarian, one of the first women in California to pursue such a career. Through it all, through the joys and challenges and ordinary miracles of family life, Vincent and Natalie remained the steady center. Their love, forged in loneliness and built on mutual respect and genuine affection, only deepened with time. They still took evening walks when weather permitted, still talked late into the night about dreams and fears and the future. They still found ways to make each other laugh, to offer comfort during hard times, to celebrate victories together. In the spring of 1898, on the 20th anniversary of Natalie's arrival in San Bernardino, Vincent arranged a surprise celebration. The whole family gathered at the ranch. Violet and David with their 3 children, Victor and Emma with young Vincent and their new baby daughter, Thomas up from San Francisco with his fiancée, and Catherine home from her veterinary studies. The house overflowed with noise and life and love. Children ran through rooms that Natalie had cleaned and organized 2 decades earlier. Grandchildren played in the yard where she'd first seen Vincent walking toward her, broad-shouldered and lonely. The ranch that had been merely functional when she arrived now stood as a testament to what could be built through hard work and love. As the sun set and the family gathered for dinner, Vincent stood and tapped his glass for attention. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning to him. 20 years ago today, he began, his voice rough with emotion, I placed an advertisement for a housekeeper. I expected someone to cook and clean and manage the household. What I got was so much more. He looked at Natalie, and the love in his eyes after 2 decades of marriage still had the power to make her breath catch. I got a woman who loved my daughter as her own, who built a home, not just a house, who gave me more children than I dreamed possible and raised them all to be good, strong, decent people, who turned a struggling ranch into a thriving legacy, who healed my broken heart and taught me that life could be joyful again. I expected a housekeeper. Instead, I married the woman who kept my heart. Tears streamed down Natalie's face as the family erupted in applause. Vincent crossed to her, taking her hand and pulling her to her feet. I love you, he said simply. For 20 years, you've been my partner, my best friend, my greatest blessing. Here's to 20 more and 20 after that, and however many years God grants us together. I love you too, Natalie managed through her tears. This life, this family, this love, it's more than I ever hoped for. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, a tangle of embraces and laughter and happy tears. Outside, the sun completed its descent, leaving the sky streaked with color. The ranch settled into evening quiet, the cattle lowing softly, the horses shifting in their stalls, the land itself seeming to breathe with contentment. Later, after the family had dispersed to various bedrooms and guest houses, Vincent and Natalie stood on their porch as they had countless times over the years. They were older now, Vincent's hair entirely gray and Natalie's showing silver strands. Lines marked their faces, evidence of years spent laughing and worrying and living fully. But the connection between them remained as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered 2 decades of life together. You ever think about that first day? Natalie asked. When I stepped off that wagon with my one carpet bag, trying to look confident when I was terrified. All the time. I remember thinking you looked too refined for ranch work, that you probably wouldn't last a week. I remember being annoyed that you'd shown up without confirmation and grateful that you had because I desperately needed help. What made you decide to keep you? Natalie, you decided to stay. I just tried not to give you reasons to leave. You gave me every reason to stay. You and Violet, this place, the possibility of belonging somewhere. Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You know what's amazing? After 20 years, I still get excited when I hear you moving around the house in the morning. I still look forward to our evenings together. I still find new things to love about you. That's not amazing. That's just what happens when two people are meant to be together. Were we meant to be together? Or did we choose each other and work hard to build something lasting? Natalie considered the question. Maybe both. Maybe fate brought me here, but love made me stay. And commitment and hard work and choosing each other every day even when it wasn't easy. It hasn't always been easy, Vincent agreed, but it's always been worth it. They stood together as stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative conversations, their growing attraction, their wedding vows, and every significant moment since. The ranch stretched around them, dark and peaceful, a kingdom built on love and maintained through dedication. Inside, grandchildren slept in bedrooms that had once been empty. The kitchen where Natalie had proved herself that first morning now bore the marks of 20 years of meals prepared with care. The porch where they stood had supported countless conversations, dreams shared, sorrows weathered, joys celebrated. Thank you, Natalie said softly. For what? For seeing me. That first day when I was just a desperate woman with no prospects, you saw me. Not what I could do for you, though that mattered too. But you saw me as a person worthy of respect and care. You saw potential for more than just an employer-employee relationship. You saw possibility. I saw the woman I'd been waiting for without knowing it. I just had to convince you to stay long enough to fall in love with me. Natalie laughed. I fell in love with you long before you realized it. I was just better at hiding it. We're quite a pair, the best pair. They remained on the porch until the night grew cold enough to drive them inside. In their bedroom, Vincent helped Natalie unbraid her hair, a nightly ritual he'd performed for 20 years. She leaned into his touch, comfortable and cherished. What do you think the next 20 years will bring? She asked. More grandchildren, probably great-grandchildren if we're blessed with long lives, watching our children build their own legacies, growing old together, fighting over who gets to spoil the grandchildren more. Sounds perfect. It does. Though I reserve the right to spoil them outrageously. As do I. They climbed into bed, fitting together with the ease of 2 decades of practice. Vincent's arm settled around Natalie's waist. Her head found its customary spot on his shoulder. This simple closeness, after 20 years, still felt like coming home. I love you, Natalie Grayson. I love you, Vincent Grayson. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they'd built together, secure in a love that had transformed 2 lonely people into an unshakable partnership. Outside, the California night settled over the ranch, peaceful and full of promise. The woman who'd arrived seeking temporary employment had found permanent belonging. The man who'd advertised for a housekeeper had found the keeper of his heart. Together, they'd built not just a successful ranch, but a family legacy rooted in love, respect, and the courage to believe in second chances. Their story wasn't one of dramatic rescues or grand gestures, though it had its share of both. It was a story of ordinary moments made extraordinary by being shared, of hard work and harder choices, of grief transformed into joy, of loneliness banished by love, of 2 people who'd expected so little finding everything they'd ever needed in each other. And in the quiet darkness of a California night, Surrounded by the fruits of their love and labor, Vincent and Natalie slept peacefully, their hearts beating in matched rhythm, their hands still clasped together even in sleep. After 20 years, they were still choosing each other, still building their future, still deeply, completely, irrevocably in love. The ranch would continue to thrive under their stewardship and eventually pass to their children, who would maintain the values Vincent and Natalie had instilled. The house would echo with more laughter, more tears, more life. The land would support more generations of Graysons, each building on what came before. But the foundation of it all would remain the same: a widower's desperate advertisement, a desperate woman's leap of faith, and the love that bloomed when two wounded hearts found healing in each other. It was a simple story in many ways, yet profound in its truth. Vincent Grayson had expected a housekeeper. Instead, he'd married the woman who kept his heart, and in doing so, found that his heart had been kept safer and more cherished than he'd ever thought possible. And Natalie Harper, who'd arrived with one carpetbag and a sister's forgotten address, discovered that home wasn't a place you found but a life you built with people who saw you, valued you, and loved you exactly as you were. Their love story would be told and retold by their descendants, a family legend that grew richer with each generation. But the truth was simpler and more beautiful than any legend could capture. It was the truth of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose love over loneliness, and who built a life so full of joy that the hardships along the way became merely footnotes to a greater story of devotion, partnership, and enduring love. And so, in a ranch house in San Bernardino, California, under a sky full of stars, Vincent and Natalie Grayson slept peacefully, their 20-year journey together just one chapter in a love story that would last the rest of their lives and echo through generations, yet unborn. It was, in every sense that mattered, a perfect ending and a beautiful beginning all at once.